योगः कर्मसु कौशलम्.
Good afternoon, all of you. Today I am going to talk about the multicultural education. I, Dr. Sudhir Tandale, Associate Professor, Center of Education, Indian Institute of Teacher Education, Gandhinagar. So, before talking about the multicultural education, we need to understand that how this culture are developed, which ultimately lead us to think about the multicultural education. So, before understanding how this culture is developed, we first of all understand the individual difference. We individual are different from each other in different sense. Each individual having a different gender, the race, the nationality, the ethnic background, the socio-economic status, the geographic region, personal interest, lifestyle of family, abilities and disabilities, perception and expectation in life, hemisphericity and a learning style, that is, a life or right brain which is operating while the individual is learning, and the values, how we are being upbringed, and our life experiences which actually develop our value system. So, in this different sense, each individual is different. When we talk about the gender, male and female, they have their own interest, own way of thinking. They have a physical appearance difference. In a way, gender wise, also, we are different. So, whenever we are giving the education to a different gender, we have to keep in mind certain characteristics of a particular gender. Same way, race or nationality, the individual who is from a different nation, a different race, they have the different appearances, the languages are different, the way of living is different, and we also different in terms of our ethnic background. Our ethnicity is different, and because of this, our culture is different, our way of living is also different. Every individual who come into the classroom of higher education having a different type of socio-economic status with them. Some of the students may be coming from the disadvantaged section of the society, the marginalized section of the society, from SC category, ST category, the OBC category, the general category, the economically weaker section of the society. So each one's social economic conditions are different. The students who are coming into the classroom having a difference in geographic region, even within the state also, the geographical differences makes a difference in terms of the language, the culture, the food, and each individual having a personal interest which is different from others. So it all leads to a individual difference. Our lifestyle in family is different from other families, from our other communities. Each student coming into the classroom having a different abilities. Some of the students are so brilliant, some of the students are average, some of the students are below average. And apart from the ability difference, there is a disability also. Student may be having a different kind of disabilities. It may be a physical disability or a mental. Our perception and expectation in life is also different. And that's why we all think we have a different goals, different objectives of life, and we work according to it. You must have observed that some of these students are writing left with left handed, and some of the students are writing with a right hand. Their learning style is different. Some of them are auditory learners, some of them are visual learner, some of them are kinesthetic learner. So everyone is different with reference to a learning style also. And apart from that, each one's value are different, how they have been upbringed, what are the learning experiences, the life experiences the individual goes into his life, and which create a certain kind of value system within the individual. And each individual's value system is different from others. So this kind of individual differences creates a different type of way of living, different type of culture into the society. And our classroom are the miniature part of the society. It represents the diversity that exists into the society. Whatever there, the difference into the society, the diversity into the society, you can observe those diversities in classroom also, in terms of all the parameters that we have talked. The language may be different, the food may be different, the way of thinking may be also different, their clothing may be different, their individual value system will be different, because they are coming from a different kind of background, socio-economic status, geographic region, different race, different ethnic background, and they have a different life experiences which is different from others. So it creates a different kind of culture into the society, and whichever the cultural difference exists into the society, that cultural difference will also appear into the classroom also. Although our classroom may be of 30, 40, 50 students, but these 30 students or 40 or 50 students are different from each other. They represent a different kind of culture, a different way of living, different value system. So in a way, we cannot treat each and every individual with the same method, same pedagogy, same way of teaching. So what is the way out? How to deal with the multicultural society, the multicultural classroom? How to deal with the inequality that exists within the classroom? how to deal with the individual differences that exist within the classroom. Whatever difference within the race, ethnicity, how to deal with this kind of differences into the classroom. These are the bigger question we need to answer. And as an the globalization is happening, our universities, our colleges are also becoming a multicultural institutions. Our classrooms are becoming multicultural. So that means we require an education which can cater the need of each and every culture, which can cater the language need, the thinking need, the perception need, the value system need of each and every individual. So one of the answer of this is a multicultural education. So we'll try to understand what is this multicultural education and how by using this multicultural education we can remove the disparity, we can remove the cultural lag, we can remove the cultural parity. So to understand the multicultural education we need to look into the different definition so that we can understand what exactly multicultural education is. So what is it? It's a system of instruction. That means the way we deal with the students, the system we apply to instruct our student, to teach our students. So it's a system of instruction that attempts to foster cultural pluralism. So it attempts to foster the needs of cultural diversity, cultural pluralism. As we have talked about it, that there is a cultural difference, cultural pluralism that exists into our classroom. So what multicultural education do is it provides us a system of instruction that attempts to foster the cultural pluralism and acknowledges the differences between the races and cultures. So it actually does not neglect the differences exist into the classroom, but rather acknowledge that yes, cultural pluralism is existing in our classroom. There is a difference in terms of races and the cultures of the students. And by acknowledging, it addresses the educational needs of a society that contains more than one set of traditions, that is a mixture of many cultures. So it gives us a system of instruction. What is that system we will understand later on, what principles or what pedagogy we can use as a system of instruction. But what multicultural education do is it acknowledges the differences and addresses the educational needs of the society that contains more than one set of traditions. Traditions represents the culture. So it addresses the mixture of many cultures and try to foster the need of the cultural pluralism. If you look into the second definition, multicultural education is an educational philosophy. It's a belief, it's an idea, it's a the paradigm through which we look into the education. So it's educational philosophy that focuses on celebrating cultural differences. That means we should not only encourage and address, acknowledge, but we should celebrate the cultural differences. Because cultural differences creates a classroom environment where a maximum interaction can be possible and maximum knowledge transfer, knowledge construction process can be happen. Because if you look into the social constructivism proposed by Vygotsky, it says that individual learn by interacting with his environment, with his society, with his culture. So if we can celebrate the cultural differences within the classroom, we actually provide students the opportunity for creating and constructing a new knowledge by interacting with the different cultural students. It also recognizes the importance of challenging all forms of discrimination. It actually challenges the discrimination based on race, gender, age, religion, ability, or sexual orientation. We may be having a students with different kind of sexual orientation also. We have students with ability and disability. We have students from different religion, different age group. When we talk about the higher education, you may be having a students from 18 plus to even 60 year students. So it actually challenges the discrimination based on these parameters and actually focuses on celebrating the cultural differences, because ultimately this cultural differences, the cultural diversity, the cultural pluralism, it actually creates an opportunity for the learning. In our classroom, it is not that teacher is teaching and students are learning. Students are also learning from themselves by interacting with them, by sharing the life experiences, by sharing the culture, the language, the traditions. So by interacting with the other students, students have the opportunity for learning from each other, their value system. So the multicultural education is an educational philosophy that celebrate the cultural differences and challenge the discrimination against any kind of race, gender, age, any kind of discrimination. They may be, the students may be having a different kind of color of skin, a different kind of the clothing, but we should celebrate it and try to challenge the discrimination, try to bring the equity and equality. Basically, multicultural education is based on the principle of inclusive education, because inclusive education is a same concept which also try to incorporate all kind of differences within the individual. We should be inclusive in terms of our all the pedagogies, our all the instruction, so that all the students who are learning in our classroom can be benefited by our instruction, our teaching. So same way as inclusive education help us to include all the students into a learning process, multicultural education also focuses on the cultural differences. What Banks and Banks says, it's an idea, an educational reform. Why it is considered as an educational reform? Because the earlier we used to address the students having a same culture. We used to have a same method because our classroom was so much of teacher centered. It was the teacher who was teaching and students just listening and try to grasp what the teacher are trying to say. From that, we have moved towards a constructivist classroom. We have moved towards a multicultural education classroom. And that's why we can say that it's an educational reform. It has a paradigm shift in terms of a teacher centered classroom to a student centered classroom. So it's a educational reform. It's a movement against the discrimination, against all kind of marginalization, which is actually excluding individual from the learning process, from the education process. So Banks and Banks try to define the multicultural education as an idea, an educational reform movement, and a process whose major goal is to change the structure of educational institutions. It's a process whose major goal is to change the structure of educational institution. It is not just a change in the pedagogy only. It tried to change the structure of educational institutions so that male and female students, exceptional students, it may be a brilliant or the below average, the students who are the member of diverse racial, ethnic, language, and cultural groups will have an equal chance to achieve academically in school and colleges. So, multicultural education actually help us in bringing the structural change in educational institutions so that we can foster the needs of each and every individual, the need in terms of their gender, their race, their ethnicity, the language, the cultural group, and giving equal opportunity, equality in terms of achieving academically. What multicultural education advocates? It advocates the belief that students and their life histories and experiences should be placed at the center of the teaching and learning process. As I have told you, now the students is the center of a teaching learning process. And students learn by sharing the experiences of the life, by sharing the experiences that they have gained from the library, from the laboratory, from the playground, from the society, from the community, from the caste, from the religion. And by sharing this, all these experiences, they create and construct a new knowledge. So, students and their life histories and experiences should be placed at the center of the teaching learning process. And that pedagogy should occur in a context. See, we have understood the pedagogy as a teaching method. It's actually not just a teaching method. Pedagogy actually includes the, the social, economic, and cultural aspect of the individual. So, whenever I'm talking about the pedagogy, I'm not just talking about the teaching method, but rather I'm talking about teaching method plus what the student is, from where he is coming, from which society, from which culture, from which economic and historical background he is coming. That thing I am also keeping in mind while I am teaching. And if I am keeping that in mind, then and then it will be considered as a pedagogy. So, the pedagogy should occur in a context, and context should be the socio-economical, historical, and cultural background of the individual. So, the pedagogy should occur in a context that is familiar to the students. That means we should try to give as much experiences of the different cultures to the students as that students feel that the content, the curriculum is actually the representation of their experiences of their culture. They can identify with them and it helps them to think in a multiple ways. So, in addition, the teachers and students must critically analyze operation and power relations in their communities, society, and the world. So not only focusing onto the pedagogy, the child-centered, the student-centered pedagogy, but also helping students and teachers to critically analyze what kind of operation that is being done within the society, within the community, within the world. Because ultimately, what is our goal? What is our democratic principles? We have to bring equality into the society. So whatever there is oppression in terms of the race, the caste, the creed, all kind of operation has to be critically analyzed. It has to be condemned. It has to be discouraged. And we should make an inclusive society. So what kind of power relations are there into the communities? How the particular caste or particular religion or the particular ethnicity is actually ruling the entire country or the states. So every individual should, each student should understand what are the power relations. Because once we understand the power relations, once we critically analyze the operation, then we'll be able to bring the equality into the society and into the world. So, if you look into the multicultural education, it has a wider scope, not only as a pedagogy, but also in bringing the equality into the society. We can have a society which can be a classless society, a casteless society. So, that is possible, but for that, we need to use a multicultural education in a very serious manner. So, to accomplish all these goals, multicultural education demands the staff that is culturally competent. That means being a teacher, I should know different culture. I should know the cultural differences. I should know the cultural pluralism. And I should have a positive attitude towards all the culture. So we should be culturally competent and to the greater extent possible, racially, culturally, and linguistically diverse. So, if in a college or in a university, if all the teachers are from different race, different culture, and different linguistic background, it will help us in bringing multicultural education because then we will be able to encourage all the culture. We will believe in cultural pluralism, but the college or the institution are based on certain narrow principles of religion or the caste. You will find that a particular religion or particular caste teachers will be there and they will be fostering only the casteism or the classism. So we need to be racially, culturally, and linguistically diverse. We must be culturally and the multiculturally literate and capable of including and embracing families and communities to create an environment that is supportive to multiple perspectives, experiences, and democracy. So, in a way, we should encourage a different perspective. We should encourage the different experiences, and we should be democratic in our principles. If we follow this principle, then we can develop a multicultural education. So, multicultural education requires comprehensive institution reform in terms of the admission, in terms of examination, in terms of the recruitment, in terms of teaching learning process, in terms of selection of the students for different activities. So, in a way, in all the practices that we do into the institution, we require a comprehensive institution reform to bring a multicultural education. And it should pervade all aspects of institution, community, and organization. If this objective of the multicultural education has to be achieved, we need to accomplish these goals. Then and then we can achieve the multicultural education in our institution, in our classroom. So, in a way, what characteristics we can draw from the multicultural education's definitions? The first is it is anti-racist education. That means it talks against the racism. It actually denies the basic concept of racism and try to include all the race into the education system. It's a basic education. Why basic education? Because this is the need of the humanity, basic need of the humanity, that we should treat each and every individual as equal. Because this is our fundamental right that everyone should behave with us equally without any discrimination, without any kind of bias, prejudice. So in a way, it's a basic education. It's a must education. So multicultural education is important for all students. It encompasses all kind of students into the classroom. It is not just paying the attention to the particular students, but rather it is paying attention to all kind of students. So multicultural education is pervasive. It is all a pervasive process. Multicultural education is education for social justice. So, by using the multicultural education, we actually help the individual and treat the individual with all social justice. Because there will be no discrimination, there will be no bias, no prejudice, and multicultural education is a critical pedagogy. What is critical pedagogy? Critical pedagogy is the pedagogy which took into account the marginalized section of the society. It is the pedagogy which help all kind of students to be included into the learning process. If you go into the National Curriculum Framework 2005, it talk about the critical pedagogy. We should use this pedagogy in a more frequent way so that we can help the children of marginalized section, the disadvantaged section of the society, to come into the main stream. We should give them the example, the pedagogy in such a way that they will feel that they are included into the teaching learning process. So these are the characteristics of the multicultural education. If you look into the principles of teaching and learning in a multicultural society, there are different principles. The first principle is professional development programs should help teachers understand the complex characteristics of different groups of children in the Indian society and the ways in which race, ethnicity, language, and social class interact to influence students' behavior. So, if you want to bring the multicultural society, this principle is very important. That we should have a professional development programs, a faculty development program, which can help the teachers of future generation to understand the complex characteristics of different groups of children. We know that India is a multicultural society, diverse society. So it will help us in understanding the society in a way the race, ethnicity, language, the social class, and how it interact to influence the students' behavior. Principle 2, institutions should ensure that all students have equitable opportunities to learn and to meet high standards. That means all the students should be given an equal opportunity to learn and meet high standards. The students who are coming from the highest class or students who are coming from the lowest class or highest caste to lowest caste, the opportunity for learning should be equal and all should meet the high standards. Principle 3, the curriculum should help students to understand the knowledge is socially constructed and reflects the social, political, and economic context in which they live and work. So we should help students to understand that curriculum is actually whatever included into the curriculum, the knowledge which has been included into the curriculum is socially constructed and it reflects the social, political, and economic context in which the students are living and working. So, the fourth principle says that institutions should provide all students with opportunity to participate in extra and co-curricular activities that develop knowledge, skills, and attitude, which can increase the academic achievement and foster positive interracial relationship. So we should give all kind of equal opportunity to participate in extra co-curricular activities because it can lead the students to the particular knowledge, skills, and attitude. And it will also increase their academic achievement and will develop the positive interracial relationship. Institutions should create or make silent superordinate cross-cutting group membership in order to improve intergroup relations. So whenever we are framing the group, whenever we are giving the task into the group, we want to create a group which include a different kind of culture, different kind of race. So it will help to improve the intergroup relationship. Students should learn about the stereotyping and other related biases that have negative effects on racial and ethnic relations. We actually use so much of stereotyping with reference to a gender, with reference to a say race, ethnicity, the language, geographical location. So this stereotyping has to be removed. Students should know the which are the stereotyping that is happening within the classroom, and we should try to avoid the biases and whatever the negative effects on racial and ethnic relationship by using the multicultural education. Students should learn about the values shared by the virtually all cultural groups. What are the common values that we actually learn, we actually use? For example, justice, equality, freedom, peace, compassion, charity. These are the common values among all the individuals. So, if we encourage all these common values, students will also associate themselves with each other in terms of common values. They will identify with each other and they will develop some relation with each other, which will help us in removing the bias and prejudice. So teachers should help students acquire the social skills needed to interact effectively with students from other racial, ethnic, cultural, and language groups. So we should, as a teacher, what is our role? We should help students to acquire a social skills, a social skill which help them to come together with each other, to interact effectively, to share the culture, to share the language, to share the traditions, so that we can enjoy the multicultural society. So institutions should provide opportunities for students from different racial, ethnic, cultural, and language groups to interact socially under conditions designed to reduce fear and anxiety. You must have found that into the classroom, some of the students having some kind of anxiety, some kind of fear. And if you just approach them, you will realize that it is because of their cultural difference, because of their language difference, the race difference, the caste difference. They will be feeling some kind of fear or anxiety. So, if the students will interact with each other, they will be able to reduce that fear and anxiety. See, the whatever the fear and anxiety, it is because of ignorance. Because we don't know the other religion, other culture, we have an apprehension that whatever they are doing, they are wrong in their culture. But when you empathize with them, when you try to see the culture, the way they do the things from their point of view, you will realize that they are not wrong in doing that thing. So by removing our ignorance, we can help the individual to reduce the fear and anxiety. So, what are the benefits of multicultural education? It helps to eradicate prejudice and racism. It brings different races together in harmony, build interaction between diverse cultures, creates tolerance between the two groups. It eradicates the cultural barriers and helps students to develop positive self-image. Because if the individual is self-biased or prejudice, he will not be come out of his fear and anxiety. He will always feel himself inferior compared to others. But if we bring the multicultural education, all students will feel that they are equal, and that will help them in developing a positive self-image within them. So it allows multiple perspectives and way of thinking, and everybody is right. Just a perspective towards a life, a perspective towards a particular thing, or way of thinking can be different. So we should be tolerant enough to accept the differences in terms of perspective and thinking. Everyone can have their own perspective, own thinking. So multicultural education help us in encouraging the multiple perspectives and ways of thinking. There are different types, dimensions of multicultural education. Mainly, there are five dimensions. One is content integration, the knowledge construction process, prejudice reduction, an equity pedagogy, and an empowering institution culture and social structure. So, by using this five dimension, we can actually bring multicultural education. We can actually use multicultural education in our classroom. So this dimension has been given by James Banks. So first we will try to understand what is content integration. So content integration focuses on what information should be included into the curriculum, which content we need to integrate into the curriculum, and how it should be integrated into the existing curriculum and its location within the curriculum. It's very important that we develop a curriculum which is based on multicultural education. That means we should have a place for each kind of culture, each kind of race, each kind of gender, each kind of ethnicity into our curriculum. Curriculum should not be biased. It should not focus on particular caste, particular religion, but rather it encompasses all kind of diversities that exist into the society. And each individual should identify that it's their curriculum. That is a content integration. So it deals with the extent to which teachers use examples and content from a variety of cultures and groups. So whenever we are teaching, we should use examples which is actually relating with the different cultures, different languages, different background, ethnic or the caste. There are frequent and ample opportunities for teachers to use ethnic and cultural content to illustrate concepts, themes, and principles in the social studies, the languages, arts, and the musics, and even the sciences also. So we should utilize all these multicultural principles whenever we are teaching a particular subjects of social studies, language, arts, and music, and try to inculcate in students the cultural pluralism. So, by curriculum, integrating with the curriculum, by integrating with the teaching learning process, by integrating with the even assessment process, we can have a multicultural education. The another dimension is the knowledge construction process. It's a process which describes teaching activities that help students to understand, investigate, and determine how the implicit cultural assumptions, frames of references, perspectives, and biases of researchers and textbook writers influence the ways in which knowledge is constructed. We need to understand this. How the teaching activities can help students to understand, investigate, and determine that whatever the cultural assumptions we have, the frames of references we have, the perspectives we have, the biases the researcher who is actually uses to do the research, the textbook writers, how they influence the textbook writing process, the way in which knowledge is constructed. ये पूरी जो प्रोसेस है वो प्रोसेस में जहां जहां पे भी the cultural assumptions we use in framing the textbook, developing the textbook, or in our research, we should try to describe in our teaching activities. We must have heard that this particular textbook is biased in terms of a particular religion or particular caste. So what kind of research, even the researchers who are doing the research, they are not bias free. They are also doing the research with particular, keeping in mind the particular culture and the particular perspective. So how this actually influence the ways in which knowledge is constructed, we should try to describe whenever we are doing the teaching activities. So multicultural teaching involves not only infusing ethnic content, into the institution curriculum, but changing the structure and organization of institution knowledge. See, we are moving from the established knowledge to the construction of knowledge process. So, we should help students to bring change in terms of their perspective towards knowledge. We should try to change the structure and organization of institution knowledge. We should actually challenge whatever the established knowledge that exists and try to develop or construct a new knowledge. So it also includes changing the ways in which teachers and students view and interact with knowledge, helping them to become knowledge producers, not merely the consumers of knowledge produced by others. Because multicultural education gives an opportunity to create a knowledge, to construct the knowledge, to produce the knowledge. So we should help students and even teachers to interact with the knowledge and create a new knowledge rather than just to consume the knowledge. If we encourage them for knowledge construction process, that means you will helping them to become an individual learner. We should also try to bring the prejudice reduction. It's a dimension of multicultural education which seeks to help students develop positive and democratic racial attitudes. We should have a positive attitude towards all the race, all the culture. It focuses on building strategies that can help to students develop more positive and racial ethnic attitudes. So it focuses on building the strategies that how we can develop more positive and racial ethnic attitudes towards of the students towards all the cultures. And it also helps students to understand how ethnic identity is influenced by the context of schooling and the attitudes and beliefs of dominant social groups. So we should try to help students to understand what are the social influences, how the dominant social groups actually overpowers the different the groups and how it influences the ethnic identity. And through that we try to reduce the prejudices. See, knowledge is the greatest thing in reducing the prejudice. More you will be able to give students how in history some caste or some religion has dominated the society and created a marginalized section of the society. This will create awareness among all the students and they will accept the discrimination that has happened into the history, and through that they will try to remove those discrimination. The another dimension of multicultural education is to have equity pedagogy. It exists when teachers modify their teaching in ways that will facilitate the academic achievement of students from diverse racial, cultural, socio-economic, and language groups. So, when we utilize the equity pedagogy, we help, we facilitate students' academic achievement who are coming from the diverse backgrounds. See, we may have seen that academic achievement of the students are different because they are having a different culture, different socio-economic background, the language. Language is the biggest barrier in academic achievement. So we should try to modify our teaching in such a way that it should be based on equity pedagogy which helps students to have a great academic achievement. It includes using a variety of teaching styles and approaches that are consistent with the range of learning styles. That means we should try to use variety of teaching styles, variety of pedagogy, and it should actually match with the learning style of the students. And equity pedagogy assumes that students from diverse cultures and groups come to institution with many strengths, and teacher practice culturally responsive teaching when the equity pedagogy is implemented. So that means our teaching should be culturally responsive. We should not react, but we should respond to a particular culture. We should try to include that particular culture in our teaching learning process. So if you do that, we are using the equity pedagogy. We are catering the needs of the diverse cultures and groups. And each culture and each group have their own strength. So we should try to utilize their strength and try to give them a culturally responsive teaching in such a way that students can have their academic achievement. So they use instructional materials and practices that incorporate important aspects of the family and community culture of their students. So being a teacher, we should try to use the different instructional material and practices which incorporate important aspects of the family and community cultures of different students. So we should have a variety of materials, variety of practices, varieties of activities, varieties of pedagogy, which can cater the needs of the individual students. And if you do that, we are using the equity pedagogy. And we should also try to empower the institution culture. It involves restructuring of culture and organization of the institution so that all feel equal. It is very important that, see, we need to restructure our institutions, then and then we can bring equality. Because whatever we foster into the institution, it actually reflects into the society. We try to bring the uniform into the school system, keeping in mind that it will bring some amount of equality into the individual. So, like that, many a structural change, the organizational change we need to make so that it can lead us to equality. We need to create institutional culture in such a way that it foster the equality. Whatever the grouping, the labeling practices, sports participation, whatever the participation in the groups we do, we should try to have equality to all. In examination, we should try to reform whatever there the factors which are actually bringing inequality. So, empowering institution structure facilitates the practice of multicultural education by providing teachers with opportunities for collective planning and instruction, and by creating democratic structures that give teachers, parents, and institution staff shared responsibility for institution governance. So it provides us a responsibility, a shared responsibility. So when we empower the institution, the staff will also empowered, and they will plan the instruction in such a way that they will create such a democratic structure so that we can bring equality into the society, into the classroom. So we can say that multicultural education is a multifaceted. It has a various dimension which we need to utilize, which we need to implement into the classroom in such a way that it can bring the equality into the society. So with this, I just end this my session by saying that multicultural education is the need of the hour. Every classroom of the institutions of India are multicultural, and therefore we require a multicultural education. We require equity pedagogy. We require a critical pedagogy. If we can use this pedagogy, if we can use the multicultural education, then we can actually fulfill the the basic principles of Indian Constitution, that is justice and freedom and equality. So with this, I just end this by thanking you all. Thank you all.